Hey, welcome back to Liam Lock Gaming. I'm Liam Lock, and we are back in the Microsoft Flight Simulator FSX Steam Edition. Today, we've got an interesting flight. My neighbor, Scott, has suggested that I fly to Paro International Airport in Bhutan. Apparently, Scott was watching YouTube and was looking at some of the worst approaches, and Paro certainly has one of them because the airport is situated in a valley between parts of the Himalaya mountain range. And the airport itself is settled down around 7,600 feet, and the peaks of the mountains that surround Paro International Airport can reach as high as 18,000 feet. So the approach into Paro requires that you fly through some of the valleys between the mountains, navigate those valleys, and descend to the airport hanging a right, kind of a blind right at the last minute for your final approach into the airport. The approach, in fact, is so dangerous that according to my Google Fi, that pilots actually have to be certified to land at this airport. So that's pretty incredible. So that's what we're going to do in this same YouTube video, and I'll put a link to it so you can take a look at it for yourself. The flight is performed in an Airbus A319, I believe. It's definitely an Airbus. I recognize the aircraft, and I think the 319 fits. But the flight in the video takes place from Kathmandu, Nepal, from the Tribhuvan International Airport in Kathmandu to Paro. This is actually a really interesting flight because between Nepal and Bhutan, if you're not familiar with the region, you're flying basically right along the Himalaya mountain range. So just to give you a visual reference of where we are in the world, I went ahead and loaded up a map for us from Google. So here we are looking at Google Maps. Beyond Europe and Africa and the Middle East, we come over here into Asia, and Tribhuvan International Airport and Paro they're located in the southern part of Asia. So if we zoom in here, just north of India. Here you have Nepal. Kathmandu, of course, is the capital of Nepal. Tribhuvan is located right there. And then Paro in Bhutan, and the substantial high mountain ranges that surround Paro. Notice, in fact, as we fly, now this is not our flight path, this is just Google's representation of point A to point B. Mount Everest is right here, right? So the highest mountain on Earth at just over 29,000 feet. I do believe I have that identified as well. Again, just for a visual reference. Notice here, so yes, now I've enlarged this just to make it easier to see on the video. Elevation 29,029 feet. The length of the Himalaya mountain range at 1,500 miles, and we're just going along a short stretch of it for about an hour. But some of the highest peaks in the world, if you look at the top 10 mountain peaks in the world, 8 of them fall in this region, in the Himalaya mountains, and most of them are part of the Mount Everest mountain range. So pretty interesting. I appreciate Scott pointing this out to me and suggesting this fly. So we're going to give it a shot and see if we can't land this airplane at Paro. Now, of course, going into Paro, because we are flying through mountain valleys, there is no ILS approach. So to land at this airport requires that the weather conditions be clear, and it must be during daylight hours. You cannot fly an ILS approach. This is definitely hands-on manual flying into the airport. So that'll be interesting. We've done that a couple times. Not my strong suit, but I'm getting a little more proficient at it, so hopefully we can pull that off. Today's flight leaving from Tribhuvan International Airport, scheduled to depart the airport at 5:15 UTC. So we're going to go ahead and get this plane started up. So for today's flight, we are flying Royal Bhutan Airlines, Druk Air. That's appropriately branded aircraft for the region that might make the flight between Kathmandu and Bhutan, and the actual flag of Bhutan is what's represented here on the tail wing of the aircraft. That's pretty cool, pretty interesting. So let's go ahead and get things started. We're going to get in an aircraft and go ahead and get the aircraft fired up, prepared for our departure today. I'm not going to talk about all of the things that I'm doing inside the aircraft. We've kind of covered the cold and dark startup a bunch of times, so we're going to kind of move through this quickly. External power is already connected to the aircraft, so we're going to go ahead and get on that right away. We'll let that get started up. Now, one thing I wanted to show as we're preparing to start up the aircraft here is I did want to show the flight plan. So we took a look at Google Map, and you saw the point-to-point Kathmandu to Paro. So here is our actual flight plan, looking at it from our Navigraph map. So we'll be flying easterly, a little bit on a southern route, and then coming back up northeast to our initial approach fix is right here as we're starting to enter the mountain range. And then from there, we'll fly a very specific course with some very specific descent guidance as we wrap around in through these valleyways into Paro. And this is the little blind corner into the runway. The runway is located right here, but we'll be flying through a valley in the mountains to come into this final approach fix. So back in the aircraft, get the nav lights turned on, just spot check here. We do have power turned on right now. Our air data inertial reference system, we want to get those fired up as well. This takes about 6 minutes to align, so we'll get that going right away. No other changes here. Everything is on. Right, we can see these switches would be highlighted if they were off. They're not off. Everything else looks good. Quick check of our fire notifications. We do have power. Let's go ahead and turn on our fuel pumps. We don't have any bleed pressure yet, so we don't have any conditioned air we need to adjust quite yet. We need to get to that here in a moment. Navigation lights are the only lights we need on right now. We're going to have passengers boarding here real soon. We'll go ahead and turn on the seatbelt signs and the no smoking. Go ahead and arm our emergency exit lights as well. No other changes on this part of the aircraft. We'll go down here to the cockpit, and we need to get our displays turned on. So these are just dimmer controlled. Now, Scott told me to fly this route several days ago, and I did. In fact, one of the things I wanted to do is I wanted to fly it cold. And I did, and it didn't go so well. Now, I didn't crash, mind you. But the mistake that I made is I flew it with air traffic control, the in-game FSX air traffic control. And unfortunately, they don't work well with the standard instrument departures or the standard terminal arrivals, which we kind of need in order to navigate the valleys of that mountain range down to Paro. So they brought me in and brought me down to 16,000 feet and then wanted me to drop to 9,600 on pretty much a straight-in course to the runway, and that just wasn't going to happen. I ended up having to do a go-around twice, trying to save myself climbing back up to 16,000 feet from about 8,000 feet from the runway because I just wasn't stable for my landing. And ultimately, air traffic control in-game FSX got a little annoyed with me because I was flying the plane, right? I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing and ignoring them. And they dropped my IFR. And I was like, hey, all right, no problem. In fact, I will probably have better luck if I just try and navigate this myself. which ultimately we did. I landed the aircraft, and I've got that video. I'll probably show a part of that here at some point. We put the plane on the ground. It wasn't clean by any stretch, but it wasn't a crash either, so I was happy with it. So we'll get the rest of these things set up here. So we're going to go to inches of mercury. That's what we'll use here for this flight. Go ahead and get the FCU set up for flight managed, following the flight guidance from the flight management computer. Everything else looks good here, so our anti-skid nose wheel is on. No other changes here. We don't have weather information yet. We'll be getting that shortly. You can see our inertial reference position will be in alignment in another 2 minutes. We need that to be in alignment before we can activate our PFD and navigation display. Other settings look good. While we're waiting for that to finish alignment, we can go over here to our right MCDU and go ahead and get our load and fuel situated. I want to take a look at our flight plan, which I have out here somewhere. There we go. So this is our flight plan. Let me just go here to the top. So from Kathmandu to Paro International Airport. And we see our fuel load here. If we go a little further down, the numbers that we need here at the moment, specifically passengers, 102 passengers, cargo 5.4 metric tons, and our fuel block will be 6.3 metric tons. And the breakdown of that fuel is up here in the top section. So we do have some reserve fuel added on for an additional hour of flight in case we have to do a go around. So we should have more than enough fuel to make it from Kathmandu to Paro, even with a possible go around. So we're going to drop that information into the aircraft. We won't be using GSX to load the aircraft today. I want to speed this along a little bit. So we'll use the Aerosoft Airbus boarding and cargo loading feature of the MCDU. 5.4 metric tons of cargo, and then 6.3 metric tons of fuel for this flight. We'll go ahead and notice that the current fuel is 2.4, so a minimum amount of fuel currently on board. We'll go ahead and start the fuel load from the MCDU. And we're not going to start the boarding yet because the plane is a little cold. If we go here and look at conditioning, we can see that in the cockpit and the cabins, the current temperature is 10 degrees Celsius, which that's about 50 degrees, so a little chilly. So before we ask passengers to board, we want to get the APU fired up. So APU master switch here. Give that about 5 seconds for the flap to open for the air intake to the APU. Click the start button, and that will get the APU starting on the outside of the aircraft. You can hear it right there in the background starting to initialize. And from inside the aircraft, our ECAM page, if we remove this selection from conditioning, automatically goes to the APU page. This is the flap open that we are waiting on, and we can see that the APU is currently initializing. Once that gets up to speed, our APU generator will come online, and we'll have available bleed pressure as well, and that's how we'll start to warm the aircraft. Alright, so our APU is available. We look up top, you'll see the avail light is now on the start button that we pressed, which is perfect. We want to go right up here to APU bleed and start to get that air flowing into the cabin and cockpit. Back down here to the conditioning page, we'll start to see these temperatures rise as that bleed pressure builds and we start to pump warm air into the aircraft. So now it's a little more comfortable. We can start calling on passengers to board, and we also want to get cargo loaded. Notice that we have zero, look over here a little closer, zero cargo currently loaded, 0 passengers. The cargo's grayed out. We want to get the doors open so that they can do their load. Front cargo, aft cargo, with those open, Now we can start our cargo load and call for our passengers. So this is going to speed us along. We'll go ahead and turn our attention here to getting our flight management computer set up and programmed. A319, that's the aircraft that we're in. As already stated, we are running with the current active nav database, so 1912. We want to go to init and put in our aircraft, or not our aircraft, our airport information. And I do have a saved flight, again, to kind of help speed this process along. I have saved our runway assignment, our SID, our flight plan, and our star and destination runway into the computer, so we're just going to recall that. From here we want to align our IRS. Let me just zoom out here for a second. If you look at the PFD and the navigation display, our inertial reference system has completed its alignment process. All we need to do is click here, align our ARS, and that brings these displays active and alive, showing the aircraft's position in relationship to our flight plan and runway assignment. Our flight number for today is going to be Delta Romeo 205. Cost index is 30. Cruising altitude is going to be flight level 290 at 29,000 feet. That looks good. Go ahead and spot check our flight plan that was loaded for us by our company route that we just loaded. We see that we are assigned runway 2. And we can take a quick... let's just look at the weather here for a moment. Go to active sky. We are all running live weather. We look at the weather control. We're getting live weather is active. Conditions currently at the aircraft position. So we have barometric pressure of 30.12. And I don't have a designated runway in use. So we're going with runway 2. Go back here. And temperature 10 degrees Celsius. So runway 2 is what we have. We have our assigned SID, which you can see here is the Igris 1B. Let me just zoom in a little bit. Oops, I hate when I do that. The keyboard is locked into the MCDU. I can't zoom in. So our SID, our standard instrument departure, is Igris 1B. Now, what does that mean? Just real quick, we do also have the navigation charts. So if we go back up here and let's look at BNKT, we'll go here to the airport and take a look at our SID. And before we look at that one, let's just look at the overview. So here's the overview. We are heading out to the Igris waypoint and then to the KMTI, so we're heading out in an easterly direction. And we can see here is the runway orientation. So we'll be taking off from 2 and basically cutting back around here, coming back over top of the airport in order to head out this Igris route. And if we look specifically at the SID, we can see here that this is going to be runway 2 here, heading straight on out, flying in a circle, coming back around the airport down to our first waypoint of Igris, and then on our way to KMTI is our next waypoint. And then our flight plan has the KMTI, that's our waypoint as we depart the SID, and our various waypoints as we approach the Subsu waypoint, which is just before we enter our star, our standard terminal arrival into Paro, and our initial approach fix on the Subsu 1 star that we'll be flying is PR888. Now this is important because there's more here to this picture than's actually been programmed into the flight management computer. At PR888 waypoint, which is the, as I said, the initial approach fix, we're going to have to slow the aircraft down to 185 knots in order to fly through the valleyways of the mountains. And we should be at flight level 170. So our cruising altitude is 29,000 feet. We will have descended down to 17,000 feet as we encounter this initial approach fix. And then the PR712 is actually the final approach fix, where our speed will be dropped down to 145 and we'll need to be down to 11,800 feet in order for us to execute our final approach down to the runway. But there's this gap here between the initial and the final approach fix that we need to flesh out, and this is the waypoints that we're going to use to navigate the valleys through the mountains. Now, we get that information by looking at a chart, so we'll go back to the navigation information, and now we'll go and look at our information for Paro. So here's the star. This is the basic star, and we said our waypoint entering this star procedure is star Subsu 1. Subsu is the waypoint that we enter, and PR888 is actually our initial approach fix. For this, we need to be at a max of 185 knots and a max flight level of 19,000 feet, minimum of 17,000. And you can see that depicted or represented down here in the bottom of this chart as well. So this is our initial. From here, we need to navigate these valleys over the mountains and basically come up here to the runway. And this is the runway. And we're going to be landing on 33. So we need to get more detail about the specific approach that we're taking. So if we look at the approach charts, there are several approaches to runway 33, and I happen to know, just save us some time here, we're going straight to approach X. Here is the initial approach fix, PR888. These are the missing waypoints that we need to program into the flight management computer in order to navigate the valleyways to our final approach fix at PR712. So we're going to drop those in right now, and we've got a couple of altitude assignments as well that we want the plane to descend down to, so we maintain a controlled, steady descent without, and also being able to maintain control of the speed of the aircraft. So let's put those in. I want to move this over just so I can look at this chart at the same time we're programming the flight management computer. So to put those in, we'll jump over here. We're just going to click on PR88, and we're going to give it an additional waypoint of PR744. And then from 744 to 742. And this has got, there are multiple waypoints for PR742. It's pretty easy to identify. You look for the closest one, which was always identified at the top. 210 nautical miles away from our present position versus 3,400. So clearly 210 is a winner. Then PR740 in the same scenario. .740 to 738. And then from 738 to 736. PR734. PR732. We got one more actually. And that's going to be PR 714. So 714, just looking back here at the chart, 714 is the last waypoint before we hit our final approach fix of 712. So that's what we just added. 714, 734, actually 732 right here, 734, 736, 738, 740, and 742 and 4. And with those entered, 714 to 712, even though this says flight plan discontinuity, we can just clear this out now as well. We'll click the clear button and remove that. That connects these up, which is what we want. And now we can complete this part of the flight plan. We're not quite done yet, though. Remember, we have some altitude restriction assignments we want to put in. So let me go back up to 788. We set it, or at 888, we want to be at 17,000 when we cross this waypoint and at a speed of 185 knots. The next one is at 740. So for 740, according to the chart, we want to be at an altitude of 14,400. So we're going to have the same speed entered. So put in first the speed, and then 1440, and we don't need the additional zeros. We just put in 144 and drop that in. So 185, flight level 14,400 feet. 738 is actually 13.6, so same thing. 13.6. Oh, I need a slash. Hello. Turn my keyboard off. Slash 13.6. .736 is 13,100. And then our next altitude, 12,400 at 734. For 732, we don't have an altitude assignment. And neither do we at 714, so our next altitude assignment falls at 712, which is our final approach fix. We need to be around 11,800. And we will be reducing our speed down to 145 at that point as well. So that completes our flight plan all the way down to the runway, so 33. And then these additional markers are for if we have to go around. So in a go-around scenario, if we are unstable or unable to land, our go-around has us going past the runway, climbing back up to 16,000 feet, and zipping back around here through the valleyways until we reach PR 777, which is where we'll do our holding pattern before we turn around and attempt our approach again back into Paro. We do have our descent altitude or height is at 10,630. Now this is kind of high considering that the airport, according to FSX, is sitting at an elevation of 7,600. And on a straight-in approach, our decision height might be 200 above the threshold of the runway. In this case, we need to make sure that we are stable and able to descend to the runway at 10,630 feet. So that'll be our decision height. So I've got that annotated here. Alright, so we've got a couple more things I guess we need to do here before we leave the flight management computer, and that is specifically put in our takeoff. So we'll be doing a flaps level 2 or flaps assignment 2 takeoff. We will be able to do a flex takeoff or a derated takeoff. It's already calculated 57 degrees for our temperature for flex takeoff. We want to make note of our V1, VR, and V2 speeds. Thrust reduction is at 58.95. That's where we'll go back into our climb detent for auto thrust control. Everything else looks to be correct. Looks good. Go to our init page. We need to put in some additional information just to get our calculations in place on approximate speeds and climb. We need to put in our block fuel information here, which was 6.3 metric tons. And now this is going to calculate our fuel predictions. One other change we need to make is we need to correct our zero fuel weight. So according to the flight plan, go back and take a look at that. Right up here we have our zero fuel weight at 58,327 kilograms or 58.3 metric tons. We want to drop that in. And if you look over here on the second MCDU, our center of gravity is at 26%, so our zero fuel weight, center of gravity 26. So what we want to do is make a slight modification over here to our fuel prediction page. 26 with a zero fuel weight of 58.3. And that's going to recalculate these fuel prediction numbers. So trip time today approximated to be about 40 minutes. We have more than enough extra fuel for an hour and 20 minutes of flight. Takeoff weight is going to be 64.4 metric tons and a landing weight of 62.2 metric tons once we burn off that fuel. And that's the last thing we had to do. So now when we go back into performance, we'll see that we have our various flap retraction speeds. So we'll make a quick note of those as well. Alright, that looks good. Go back to our flight plan, and now you can see we've got our various speeds and altitude predictions associated with the flight plan. So that completes the flight management computer programming. We're just about ready here. Looks like the boarding of both cargo and passengers is complete, so we want to get the doors closed and prepared for departure.
Captain, the cabin is secure. All passengers are aboard.
All right, excellent. So we're just about ready for our pushback from the gate. We want to go ahead and get the beacon light turned on just to give the ground crew alert that the engines will be starting up here very shortly. Spot check other settings. Want to go down and take a look at the brake pressure. Notice over here that the brake pressure indicates 0, so we need some brake pressure for the emergency brake, which is currently not set because we've got the wheel chocks under the tires. So to do that, we need to go back to the airbed console and go ahead and turn on this electric pump for hydraulics. And this will start to build pressure in our brake system. So with pressure now, we'll go ahead and turn on the parking brake. And we'll do a quick scan, make sure everything's ready to go. Flaps are retracted, engines are currently off, throttles are in the idle position. We should be about ready to ask for pushback. No ATC, so we're not filing IFR, we're not requesting taxi clearance, just because we're not using ATC today for this flight. We're going to assume that we're receiving all of those permissions. Everything looks good. If we look outside here, we do still have the jetway attached to the aircraft. We could manually remove that using GSX, or when we call for pushback, the ground crew will actually have that disconnected for us. So let's just go ahead and get that started. So pushback, one thing we should have checked here, and I'll just get off of this screen for a moment. It's always a good idea to know which direction you're going to be pushing back from the gate. I like to take a look at the moving map application, which I think is great. So just another representation of where we are. If we zoom in on the airport, we're in obviously the capital of Nepal, so a large city center, the airport situated right there in the middle of. And if we look closer, we have the number for our runway, so 02 is down here, and that's the runway we're going to be departing from. So that basically gives us the information we need to say, okay, we're going to push back and put the nose of the aircraft to the left so that we can travel down the taxiway and get onto the runway. Excellent. We'll go back, and now we're ready for our pushback. And nose left. No, we're not going to start the engines before pushback. And while they're getting situated, let's hop back on board here and get our weather information check again real quick. So current aircraft position, barometric pressure 30.12. We do need to make that change.
Hello, Captain, we are ready for pushback.
So we'll dial in 30.12. And we need to make that change down here on the standby altimeter as well. Then we've got to go to ground services, get the external power disconnected, get the traffic cones lifted, and the wheel chocks removed. So the pushback tow truck crew can do what they need to do.
Looking here. Departure check completed. Bypass pin inserted. Release parking brakes. Commencing push. All engines clear. Start at will.
So we have clearance from the ground crew to go ahead and start our engines. So we'll go over here to the ignition start and bring up engine number 2. We want to turn off this air conditioning page so we can see the engine startup parameters. Everything's in the green. We do see initialization of engine number 2. Well, we want to keep an eye on our pushback at the same time. Look forward here, we can see the engine 2 is starting to fire up. Engine number 2 appears to be started up. No issues. Go back here and start up engine number 1. That's probably far enough. We can go ahead and tell them to stop right here.
Set parking brakes.
So it looks like we have stable parameters. Engine number 1 is started up. Appears to be good to go. Back to the normal position here on our engine startup. Parking brake is set. Waiting for clearance from the ground crew.
Unlocking gear. Tow truck disconnected. Bypass pin removed. Left is clear. Right is clear.
So we're clear from ground crew. We just got a couple little last minute things to do. We want to get prepared for takeoff, so in case we have to reject the takeoff, we're putting on the auto brake for max. We want to set our spoiler to automatic arm for takeoff. We want to check our flight controls now that we've got the engine on, so full left ailerons, full right, elevators down, elevators up, rudder left, rudder right, all is good. We want to get our pitch trim set, so flaps to takeoff, pitch trim is up 0.8. You can see that here, pitch trim 0.8 up. That there is set. Turn flight controls off again. Wheels are good. On the overhead, we want to get our navigation lights turned on, runway turnoff lights, and our taxi lights turned on. And we no longer need the APU now that we have the engine, so we can turn off the APU bleed, turn off the APU as well. We no longer need the electric pump on as well. Pressure is built up across all 3 hydraulic systems. Looks good. One last thing, we want to set our transponder code. We'll just use 2563. We're going to put this in just expander mode for the moment. We're not turning on our TCAS system quite yet until we get to the runway. At this point, we should be ready to taxi down here to the runway. It's right here in front of us. We want to do a brake check as we get started, so we'll get the engines going here a little bit, get the aircraft rolling, and as we start to roll, do a brake check. Brakes are good. Make our way on down here to the runway. We also want to get our flaps in position, so we'll start them to flaps position 2 right now. They're currently extending. Ground speed 20 knots, slowing down just a hair, 19 knots. Looking at our ECAM page, we've got the takeoff config button we need to perform a test on. See the little blue indication for TO config, set the test. That just makes sure that we're configured correctly for takeoff.
Approaching 02.
So this is the runway threshold. We're going to stop right here. Get a couple more things in order real quick. So take care of that takeoff config test. Everything is good. Do a quick status check. No warning messages. Everything appears to be fine. Put our transponder TCAS system to on, TARA. Get our radios turned on, although we're not really going to need them for this flight, and get our radar turned on as well. And for takeoff, I'm actually going to turn on the terrain. We got mountains all around us, so we get our terrain displayed. We're going to go up top to the overhead console here. Let me just make this easier to see. We're getting ready to enter the runway, so we're going to put our strobe in the on position. Everything else looks good. So we'll pretend that we've got clearance from the tower to proceed on the runway. This runway here, we actually need to go down here to the end and make a U-turn down there and get ourselves in position for takeoff. So we're going to do that right now.
On runway 20. "900 feet remaining." Approaching 02. On runway 02.
Alright, looks pretty good. Before we get going here, we want to hit our, we want to turn on first our takeoff lights, our landing lights. Go ahead and hit our chrono and get underway. Flex takeoff, so our D-rated takeoff. past 80 knots. V1, rotate. Positive rate of climb, gear up. Following our flight director lines, you see the green crosshairs on the primary flight display. So we're trying to follow them as best we can. We're not chasing them per se. We're trying to stay with them. This is our assigned flight path out of Tribhuvan International Airport. We want to retract our flaps one position. I'm going to go ahead and engage the autopilot at this point. Makes things a little easier on us. And we're beyond our thrust reduction altitude, so we go back to our climb detente. Turn off our taxi lights. Gear up. Bring our flaps in. A little late there to bring the flap in as we're starting to pick up speed. And you can see here we have the airport that we just took off from. Beyond that already, we got. That's why I was so late getting the flaps retracted. A little hard to see. It is overcast outside. We've got some fairly low cloud cover. We are flying with live weather, live dynamic weather. So this is. Apparently the actual weather right now in Nepal, in Kathmandu. So we don't need the terrain radar on anymore. Turn that off. Take a look here at our flight plan. So we are still making our way out on our SID. We are still also our speed, we were picking up speed there a little bit, and that's what I was a little bit curious about, why we were picking up so much speed. We are in the climb detente, our auto thrust. Our ground spoilers don't need to be armed anymore. Our flaps are fully retracted. Our speed is climbing again. Auto thrust is apparently not engaging correctly. I want to turn this off and re-engage this and make sure that we are actually in the climb detente. So there we go. It seems that it's picking back speed again because we're still climbing. 17 knot rear tailwind, and picking up speed again. I see part of the problem. Now I see part of the problem. The plane doesn't have any, it's not flying on a set altitude. So this was my mistake on the FCU. We didn't set the assigned climb altitude to 29,000, so it wasn't controlling our ascent rate. So the engines were basically running way fast than what they needed to be. Now we are in a controlled climb up to flight level 29,000. Figure out why we were going so fast there. That doesn't typically happen, and because of, make sure we're turning here, we need to get back on course. We're a little bit off course from our flight plan. Let's get that dialed back in again. So the navigation, the flight computer is a little off navigation-wise. You can see here we are out to the left of our expected flight plan. So now we're going to get back on course and get this situated. So that's how easy mistakes can certainly throw you off. One little oversight there and unexpected speed, but we managed to keep it under control, and now we're getting back on course. Things are looking a little better. Beautiful mountain range, the Himalaya Mountains. I love what the FS Global 2010 brings to the game. The presentation of the mountains and the change in elevation is just fantastic compared to what it was in the original FSX. You can really make out the mountain elevation changes. The shadows, just really strong. The texture is great. So while we're out here flying, it's a good day to actually look at the mountains and see if we can't pick out Mount Everest. So now that we've got the aircraft back under control and we're getting back onto our flight plan, let's go see where we are in relationship to Mount Everest. So we want to center the aircraft here, zoom out just a little bit. So Mount Everest is up here. I put a little marker on the map to make it easier to see, and this is our current travel path. We just left Kathmandu back here, so this is updating as we fly. So we can take a look at how far away Everest is. So we'll go up here and just click on Everest to the aircraft. So what is that, 51.6 nautical miles away off our left wing at about 45 degrees. Jump outside. So about 45 degrees off our left wing. So I believe that there is Mount Everest, right there off in the distance. That's about 45 degrees. I'm going with that's Mount Everest right over there. And Mount Everest, the peak of Mount Everest, is actually higher than what we're flying currently. 29,000 feet up in the air. Currently we are at 25,000, climbing to flight level 290, 29,000 feet. Being up this high, we are also a little late because of dealing with the other issue we had in the aircraft. We want to go to the overhead console, go ahead and turn off our landing lights, so we'll leave those on right now. Everything else is good to go. We'll put our seatbelts on auto so passengers can move about the cabin. Spot check our other controls. Everything appears to be good. Engines are looking good. Zoom out here a little bit. Now we've got a a little bit of time here as we continue our flight, climbing to cruise. I want to show you what we did with the flight plan. So we changed to plan mode up here on our EFIS panel and change our display to zoom out a little bit. We can see where we are. So we're flying towards the Tumli, T-U-M-L-I waypoint, which is currently 40 nautical miles away from us. That's our active target. And from there, if we look ahead, we can scroll forward and see our next waypoint of Michi, BGD, and recall the start of our star into Paro is the Subsu waypoint, which then takes us to our initial approach fix of PR888. And then from PR888, we'll zoom out here just a little bit. We can see we have very specific waypoints that guide us through the valleys as we make our descent between the mountains into Paro Airport, coming in here to our final approach fix at 712, wrapping around the mountain, and then turning for our descent and landing at Paro. You'll see there is the runway right there. This little indicator is just our top of climb. We're just about there. You can see we're just about to hit 29,000 feet, our cruising altitude. Now let's take a look at Mount Everest again. So it should be a little further up our wing. I believe that's going to be it right over there. And we'll confirm that by again looking at moving maps. So moving maps. Here we are. We'll bring this back over a little bit. So Mount Everest is almost directly off of our left wing at about 35.8 nautical miles. I still think that's it right there. I don't think that's behind us. I think it's right here, Mount Everest. We got a little bit of rough air. You can see the plane moving about, a little bit of turbulence. Pretty mild. So we're going to continue here for just a little ways at our cruise altitude of 29,000 feet. We are presently 167 nautical miles away from the Paro International Airport. We're going to go ahead and stop at this point and come back when we're a little bit closer and we start our descent into the mountains that surround Paro. I appreciate you watching. If you like this video, please click the thumbs up. I do appreciate it. And if you'd like to see more of these videos, by all means, click the subscribe button. I appreciate you coming to Liam Locke Gaming. I'm Liam Locke, and we will see you for the arrival into Paro International Airport. Thanks.